In the previous video, we've talked about this type of position where black has the move and has a queen, however is not able to win against the rook pawn on the 7th rank with the king next to it. Well, this is true, but it's true just because the black king is far away. These type of positions can be won if the black king is close to the white king. How close does the black king have to be? Well, the rule says if black has the move and can reach the critical squares g6 and f7 next to the white king in 2 moves, then he will be able to win this type of position. There are books that say if black is in the shape that it's seen on the screen and has the move, then he is able to win. However, from my experience and reading a lot of other books, other grandmasters agree with me that it's very hard for people to remember these type of odd shapes. So the easiest way, I think, for you to remember the critical squares is think about the queening square. The queening square here is h8, and both of the critical squares are a knight move away. Therefore, the easiest way to remember this rule is that if you have the move and your king can reach the 2 critical squares in 2 moves that are a knight move away from the queening square, then you are able to win. So let's take a look at both scenarios. First, we're going to take a look if your king can reach the critical square g6 in 2 moves, and then we're going to take a look how to win the game if your king can reach the critical square f7. So in the first position, black has the move, and you can see we can reach the critical square g6 in 2 moves. And the winning idea is very simple. You want to reach this type of position where your queen has control of the 7th rank, and after he queens, you want to be able to take the opposition because there's nothing that white can do here to stop you from checkmating him. Anywhere he moves the queen, you'll be able to take it, and if he moves it somewhere far away, you will be able to come with queen f7, and after he moves to h8, you have queen h7 mate. Now, going back to the beginning, this can be reached very easily. All we have to do is, first of all, you want to make sure that you take control of the 7th rank, so we could come with queen to b7 check. And now white has 2 options. He could move to g8 or to h6. Let's take a look at both of those scenarios. Let's say he moves to h6 first. After that, we're just going to cover this queening square. He's going to come back next to the pawn and then get the queen closer and closer to him. Let's say he keeps going back. We get the queen closer and then queen e7 check. And now if he goes to h6, then we could check him, and he's not able to come to g7 to protect the pawn. And after this, after he moves away, we could just cover the queening square and then take the pawn. And if he does move to g8 now, then we will be able to bring our king closer. After he gets a queen, we could see that we are able to get the opposition and win the game from here. The best try that white has in this case, and you have to be careful, is queen to f6. And here you want to be careful. You want to make sure you take it with the king. If you take it with the king, then after he moves to h8, you have queen g7 mate. But if you take that queen with your queen, this is actually stalemate. So you got to be careful of that type of situation. And if here the king goes to g8 instead of h6, then all we have to do is bring the king closer. After he queens, we'll be able to take the opposition. And like I said, there's nothing that I can do here to stop you from checkmating him. Anywhere he moves the queen, you'll be able to take it. And if he moves it somewhere far away, you will be able to come with queen f7. And after he moves to h8, you have queen h7 mate. The other scenario is when black has the move and can reach the critical square f7 in 2 moves. Here, the goal is this position right here. After white queened, you want to be able to check him on g5. And now white has only 2 options, either to come to h7 or to f8. If he comes to h7, then we take the opposition. And the same thing, white cannot stop checkmate. And if white steps on f8, Then we've got queen to e7 check. After the king moves to g8, then we got queen f7 mate. So let's go back from the beginning and let's see how we can reach this position in all the different scenarios. So here's the beginning, and what you want to do first is queen to g1 check. You want to check them vertically, and from here there are 4 different options that white can play here. White can go in front of the pawn, white can go to h6, white can go to f8, or it could go to f7. Let's take a look at each of them one by one. First of all, let's take a look at king to going in front of the pawn. If the king goes in front of the pawn, obviously you do not want to move your king because this will be stalemate. So what you want to do is queen to d4 check. This will get the king out. Let's say king g8. Then we're going to go queen to g4 check. Again, he's going to go in front. Queen f5, we slowly bring our queen closer. Here we let the white king get out. King to g7. And now we're going to bring our king to e6. From here, white will queen. And after he queens, we get this position, queen to g5 check, where we've talked about there's only 2 options. If he plays the king to h7, then we take the opposition, and there's nothing that white can do to stop you from checkmating him. The best try he has, again, is queen to f6, where you got to be careful not to take with the queen, because this would be stalemate. And after you take it with the king, then you got queen to g7 mate. And if the king moves to f8, then you've got queen to e7 check, and then queen to f7 mate. Now let's look, instead of king to h8, let's look what happens if he goes to h6. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start bring our queen closer and closer to him. So we're going to do queen h2 check, king to g7, queen g3 check, queen to h6, queen to h4 check, king to g7, and then here we're going to bring our king to e6. And here he has 2 moves. He could move the king to g8. In that case, we count queen to g5 check. He moves in front of the pawn. Queen f6 check. He moves out. Queen to f7 check. He moves inside the pawn. Queen f8 mate. And if he queens, we got queen g5 check, where he has either king h7 or king f8. Let's look at king f7. Here we move the king and take the opposition, and there's nothing that white can do to stop black from checkmating him. The best try is queen f6, where again you don't want to take with the queen because that will be stalemate, and we're going to take with the king. And after he moves to h8, we got queen g7 mate. And if he moves to f8 instead of h7, then we've got queen e7 check. After he moves to g8, we got queen f7 mate. I do want to mention that there are other ways to win here as well. Instead of moving the king to e6, you could also win by moving the king to e7, taking the opposition. And here, if he queens, then we've got queen to g5 check. After he moves to h7, we take the opposition, and there's nothing that he can do to stop checkmate. And if he moves to g8 instead, then here you got queen g5 check. He moves in front of the pawn. You got queen f7 check. He gets out, and then you got queen f8 mate. Next, let's take a look at king to f8. If he moves king to f8, we're also going to bring our queen closer and closer. So queen f2 check, then queen g3 check, king f8, queen f4 check. And now when he steps on g7, we will be able to bring our king to e6. And after he queens, we get the queen to g5 check. And we've talked about how to win this game if he moves on h7 or on f8. And now the last scenario is the king moving to f7, taking the opposition. Well, here, same scenario, we're going to bring our queen closer. Queen f2 check, king to g7, queen g3 check, king to f7, queen to f4 check, king to g7. And now we're going to be able to bring our king to e6. And after he queens, queen to g5. And we've talked about how to win this type of game. In the end, I want to show you that the same type of strategy can be applied into other scenarios when the king is on the edge of the board. So here it's white to play, and white is going to get a queen on the first move, and black is going to get a queen on the second move. So here both players have the queens. However, white is winning. What white has to do is queen to f8 check. And from here, black has three different options. He could move to a4, he could move to a3, or he could move to b2. The first one, if he moves to a4, this ends the game pretty quick. After queen to a8 check, the king has to move away, and we will capture the queen and win the game that way. The second option is king to b3. If the king moves to b3, what we're going to do is queen to b8 check, and then queen to a3, and slowly we're going to bring our queen closer, queen to a7 check. Here black has to defend the queen. If he moves to b3, we will be able to capture the queen, so king b2 is his only move. Then we bring the queen closer, queen b6 check, and now he has two options, king to a2 or king to a3. If he moves to a2, we're gonna bring the king, taking the opposition, and now there's nothing that black can do to stop checkmate. Any queen move, we're gonna be able to check on b3, and after he moves down, queen to b2 is mate. And if he moves to a3 instead, we're just going to bring the queen closer. After queen b2, we got queen to b4 check. And now there's two options again. He can move to c1 or he can move to a2. If he moves to a2, then we're going to take the opposition and we will be able to win this game. And if he moves to c1 instead, then we're going to be able to move the queen to d2 check and then to c2 mate. And the last scenario is king to b2 right away. Well, this one ends pretty quick. After queen to b4, he has only the two options, king to a2 or c1. We've talked about if he comes to a2, we're just going to take the opposition, and then there's nothing that he could do to stop checkmate. His best try will be queen to c3, where you want to make sure you take with the king, not with the queen, because that will be stalemate. So after we take it with the king, we got mate on the next move. And if he moves the king to c1, then we've got queen to d2 and then queen to c2 mate. Okay, thank you for watching. Hopefully these ideas help. I encourage you to check out my website, masterchess.com, where you'll be able to practice these type of positions and more similar to them.